Now, I've already mentioned once the three pillars of empiricism in this class. Those pillars, if you can remember them, were transparency, inspection, and adaptation. Collectively, when applied, they create an empirical feedback loop. What I mean by that is that it allows us as the Scrum team to gather feedback from ourselves, our stakeholders, or our observations, and move our product towards value. We can see the evidence of that empirical feedback loop in our artifacts in Scrum, and we adapt those artifacts during our Scrum events. For example, during a sprint review, we may make changes and we may see changes being made to the product backlog based on stakeholder feedback. Let's dive into each of those three pillars to see what we mean by the words transparency, inspection, and adaptation. When we talk about transparency, there are many aspects in Scrum that need to be transparent. The Scrum Guide talks about the emergent process, i.e. the process that the Scrum team use to deliver their product, and also the work itself must be visible to those performing the work, as well as those receiving it. Transparency is important and powerful, but it is also hard. It requires trust and being supported by the 5 Scrum values, which we will explore a little bit later. As a Scrum Master, helping a team to be more transparent, to be more open with not just their victories but also their mistakes, is incredibly challenging. The reason why transparency is important in product delivery is because the decisions that we make, i.e. the empirical adaptations, need to be based on a position of truth. It is pointless making adaptations if the state of the work is not truthfully understood. Where we make decisions based on artifacts that have a low transparency, that can lead to decisions that diminish value and increase your risk. As the Scrum Guide so aptly puts it, transparency enables inspection. Inspection without transparency is misleading and wasteful. Inspection is the second pillar of empiricism, and in order for it to enable purposeful adaptation, the progress made, specifically on the artifacts to the agreed goals, is inspected by the Scrum team frequently, through the lens of transparency. Every event creates an opportunity for inspection through the cadence of the 5 events in the Scrum Framework. So quite honestly, there's no reason not to inspect. There's plenty of opportunities to do it. The reason why we inspect so frequently is because we want to identify any variances. Let me give you an example that will sound so obvious, but when applied to product delivery, it's so important. Imagine you're driving down a road, but that road has direction signs every 1 mile. You are able, as the driver, to frequently inspect your position and know that you are on the right track. You are likely to get to your destination. But imagine you're driving down the same road, but the direction signs are every 15 miles, not every 1 mile. In which of the 2 scenarios are you more likely to get lost and not meet your goal? Obviously, it's the second one. It is for that reason that frequent inspection is important in Scrum, so that we are constantly moving towards value. Again, to quote the Scrum Guide, inspection enables adaptation. Inspection without adaptation is considered pointless. The final pillar that closes our empirical feedback loop is adaptation. It's great if your team are transparent about their progress and willing to inspect to identify any undesired variances. But if they do nothing about it, then what was the point? If you don't adapt, you lose all of the effort spent trying to be empirical so far. Whenever we identify variances, the Scrum team must adapt as soon as possible to minimize any further deviation from the sprint goal. It's at this point we can link to a topic that will be coming up later in the class, self-management. When a Scrum team feels empowered and owns the product and problem they are working on, adaptation is much more simple. It's worth saying that the right to adapt doesn't give developers carte blanche to decide what needs to be done. The product owner still remains accountable for the product backlog and the product goal. So the takeaway from this video is that Scrum is founded upon empiricism. The Scrum team exercise the empirical feedback loop of transparency, inspection, and adaptation through the use of the Scrum events. Importantly, without closing the feedback loop and making impactful, purposeful adaptations based on truthful transparency, you're wasting your time. The 3 pillars of empiricism help you to make the next best step.